Make sure you check out our online store where we work with our graphic designer to create stunning garment and product designs that feature a wide variety of aircraft types such as British fighters, World War II aircraft, American bombers, Russian fighters and much more. You can pick your favourite designs and personalise any items within our Redbubble store that range from clothing right the way through to stationery. All of our designs feature our logo so you can show your support for the channel while getting a quality product. You can head to our website aircrewinterview.tv and click store, or go to redbubble.com/people/AC interview. Thank you and enjoy. So Emily, when did you first become interested in aviation?
So I have a vivid memory of my dad taking my brother and I to an air show when I was very young. I think maybe I was 6 or 7. And I'm from a very, very rural area of Western Colorado. And that was the big event of the year every year was an air show. And so I remember him taking us and I was always drawn to the big planes, like, like the fighters were loud. The Blue Angels were there that year, I remember. But there was a C5 there and I was just mesmerized by how big it was. And so that's the first memory that I have of being like, wow, I could do that one day.
Absolutely. So what year did you join the Air Force and why did you choose the Air Force over the Navy?
So I went to the Air Force Academy and so that's a big interview process and all of that to get selected to go there. And I ultimately ended up choosing Air Force because they recruited me for track. And so at that stage of my life, like sports ran my life. Like that's all I could focus on. That's all I cared about was athletics. And my future beyond that, I was not concerned about. And so the Air Force Academy was like, come run for us. It's a full ride scholarship. You'll serve afterwards. I'm like, okay, yeah, well, I'll figure that out down the road. Like this is what I want to do. I want to go run there. So that's how I started on the path. Now I stayed on the path for different reasons, obviously, but that's what got me started.
That's quite interesting, actually, because it's like, oh yeah, run for us, but then we'll figure out what you're going to do later. Or you figure out. Is that quite a normal path for folks to take in the Air Force?
Just at the academy,
Just
yeah.
at the
And
academy.
so just at the academy, and depending on what you do, it's a 5-year commitment or a 10-year commitment after graduation from the academy. And so at the time, I honestly like my dreams and hopes of flying one day were not at the forefront of my mind. And so later on down the years, like I think it was junior year that we chose our jobs. I initially didn't put pilot,
Wow.
and yeah, yeah. And so I didn't put pilot because at the time people were washing out and they were washing out of pilot training. They were failing out. So I didn't put pilot. I was afraid of having to pay back this huge amount of commission or tuition, and I immediately regretted it. Like you submit it in a system, and I submitted it, and I was like, oh God. I like had this pit in my stomach, and I was like, you know what? This is what you chose. This is your path. Like this happened for a reason. And it was a few weeks later, they came back and they said, hey, the system had a glitch. Like you have to resubmit. And I knew that was a sign I was like, this is literally a sign from God. Like I am supposed to do this. So I put pilot and it's the best thing I did ever. It's the best thing I've ever done for sure.
Absolutely. But let's get on
Yeah.
to the kind of aircraft side. So can you talk us through some of the aircraft you started training on?
Sure. So I had 0 hours of flight experience before I started my pilot training journey, which I love because it means like the Air Force can take any person off the street who has the mental capability to divide things by 60 and turn them into an Air Force pilot. And I love that about our system. And so I had 0 hours. The first plane I flew was the DA-20, and that was during IFS. It's called initial flight screening. So that's when they run you through a bunch of different profiles and see if you have the aptitude to continue on. And then from there, I went on to UPT. So our version of pilot training, like the formal course. And I flew the T6 initially for about 6 months. And then I tracked heavies. And so then I went to fly the T1 Jayhawk, which is like a little 2-engine executive jet. And from there, that's when I dropped C-17s. And so a few months later, went down and started C-17 initial qual.
And at this point, you said obviously the air show like got you into it, but were you interested in aviation, or was it kind of just like I'll join, for the sport thing, or were you generally interested in the aviation side of things?
I I became interested
Okay.
the longer I was there. We would have flyovers and you know you have so many other things going on. You don't. I never truly understood the mission set of the different aircraft.
Okay.
Um, and until I got older and I started paying attention and being like, huh, what does that do? Like, where did they go? What, you know, when you're a kid, like it's fast and loud, right? That's the most interesting. And then as you get older, you're like, okay, but what if I want to go to the bathroom? What plane do I fly then? Like,
Yeah.
so that's what piqued my interest was understanding the mission set and then going from there.
So you said you dropped C-17, but did you have a choice when you obviously directed it to the path for heavies, or was it like assigned to you? Did you want to go to the C5 or something like that?
So they give you what's called a dream sheet.
Hmm.
And so it's the dream sheet, the aircraft available on the dream sheet is based off of the Air Force needs, the needs of the Air Force. Like this is who needs bodies right now in cockpits.
Right.
And so on my dream sheet, there were C-17s. I think there was a handful of C-5s, KC-135s, some odd ones like a U-28, MC-12, um, a C-21, maybe a couple of those. So just a litany of things. And then you literally rack and stack 1 through X.
Mhm.
First, I want C-17s to McCord. Then I want C-17s to Travis, and so on and so forth. And so I did put C-17s to McCord first. My husband and I were only a class apart in pilot training. He was 1 class ahead of me, and so his drop night was prior to mine. So I got to see him experience that, which was cool. But we knew that we wanted C-17s, and we thought McCord sounded cool. So it was either between that or Charleston, where we wanted to go initially.
So that must have been an icing on the cake when you both got the same base. That must have been really
Oh, it
cool.
was. It was. They actually tricked me. Um, I don't know if you've seen a video of drop night, but it's a
Yeah,
whole
I have. Yeah.
production. Like it's so exciting. Like the room is filled, it's buzzing. It's just
Yeah.
filled with electricity. And they tricked me. They told me that I got C-17s to Travis. And my Jared was videoing me. I wish we still had this video. And he just like dropped his phone and stopped recording because he thought we were going to be
Oh,
separated. But I was still so excited because I was like, well, I got C-17. Like that's what I wanted.
still cool.
And then they ended up bringing it back. And we're like, just kidding. You got McCord. And I was like, okay, even better. But
Yeah,
yeah, it was fun. That was a great night for our family.
absolutely. So let's talk about the C-17. So what were your first thoughts on the aircraft?
Oh, it's big. She's a big girl.
It
Um,
is.
sometimes I forget. And then when I do my walk around, I'm like, my God, this thing is so big. Um, but I was so excited about it because of the array of mission sets that it does. Like we get to do some very cool things
Hmm.
and touch nearly every part of the world, which I absolutely love about it.
So yeah, can you talk us maybe through the initial role of the C-17 when it was introduced, and what kind of role it has now when you're flying it?
Yeah. So, um, gosh, I wish I knew like when they first started rolling off the assembly line in Long Beach, but this is like our big cargo girl. Like obviously C5s hold more than us.
Yeah.
There's less of them and they can't go to all the places we can go. C-130s hold less than us. They can get into a lot of places that we can't get into.
Hmm.
So we're middle of the road. We can hold a bunch and we can go to short fields, land on the dirt, stuff like that, which just makes us so capable. And so obviously with the wars over in Afghanistan and Iraq, we've been utilizing the C-17 an immense amount to take cargo in and out, take people in and out, go into dirt strips, all of that stuff. So um, she's been beat up the last 20 years or so for sure. But now kind of shifting roles, we're doing a lot more out here in the Pacific, which is where Jared and I are at right now, focusing, shifting our view over to our friends in the East, if you will.
Hmm.
Um, but Yeah, I'm trying to think. So that's part of what I love about the C-17 is when I train at home, I train airdrop and airland. So airland is what you think it is, right? It's your traditional, what you see big cargo planes do. We take off from one location full of stuff, take it to somewhere else, offload, re-upload, like rinse, repeat. Airdrop, we can do all of that and upload, drop it while we're flying, drop whoever needs to go wherever, and it's a lot more complex mission set. It's a lot more technical, which is what I like about it. It pushes me like that you can get yourself into some very hard scenarios that you try to plan around.
Yeah.
And that's Jared and I have a passion for airdrop because of that, because it really, really pushes us mentally. And you have to be very flexible and you have to know your aircraft very well.
Yeah. And would you say, is the C-17 the workhorse of the US Air Force, or is it still considered the C-130 is still that got that role?
I mean, I don't want to start any fights here, but yeah, yeah, she's a workhorse. I mean, yeah, she, if they can send a C-17, they want to send a C-17. So, one, it's easier. We can hold more than the C-130, right? But it's also a little more comfy. Has a few more creature comforts than a C-130 does. So.
Yeah, it does look a bit more comfy. I've heard some horror stories from C-130 guys, but guys and girls. But yeah, yeah. Can you talk us through some of the loadouts the C-17 can actually carry?
Yeah, sure. So our shining light is that we can carry a M1 Abram tank, right? So that's a
Wow,
big
yeah,
old tank. In the back, we can hold one. It maxes out the floor space, and but I've hauled. I think I have a picture that I have. It's either 4 or 6 of the AMRAPs in the back.
Crikey.
Those big armored troop
Yeah.
carriers. I've hauled road graders, like random outsized cargo. Obviously, helicopters. We can fit a couple of those bad boys back there. So just depending on what size and what kind they are. But the big thing with airdrop is we can hold 40 bundles. So we can sling 40 bundles on one pass. So 40 of your standard platforms on one pass, and that takes up the whole floor. But that's what makes it such a capable aircraft in terms of airdrop.
And that must take a lot of planning, that kind of payload. You must have to sit down and brief a long time before to make sure everything's right, because also there's a lot of crew on board as well.
Absolutely. You have to trust your load masters inherently. You have to know that they're going to handle it because there's so much going on upstairs. You don't have time to worry about what's going on downstairs. So we take a lot of time and pre-mission planning to ensure we're all on the same page, to make sure the user's on the same page, that they understand where their stuff's going to land, that we agree on said spot. Yeah, it takes a lot of planning, but it's also a great way to meet people and build connections, which is something I love about that mission set as well.
Yeah, so how many crews would you normally fly with? Obviously, it's dependent on mission, I guess, the mission set.
It does. So we can fly basic or augmented.
Okay.
So basic crews, 2 pilots and 1 load is allowed. We usually fly 2 and 2. So 2 pilots, 2 loads. That shortens your duty day. Augmented, 3 pilots, 2 loads, and that extends your duty day to 24 hours.
And let's just go back a bit, because I want to talk a bit about your ground training. What was it like coming from, the T1, this little business jet, to this monster? What was that like going into ground training?
Oh, man. I remember Jared and I both having this sentiment. They were like, because that was, the 3rd plane we're learning in just over a year.
Wow.
And which is a lot.
Yes.
And we were just like, man, this is so much more complicated than the T1. Like, let's go back. Facetiously, obviously, but
yeah.
Yeah, it was daunting, to be totally honest. It was very daunting to go from, JV, if you will, to varsity and be like, oh, this is a whole different ball game. Like, this is a real airplane. So yeah, and ground training for C-17 initial qual is like 3 to 4 months. And it starts off like you do we call them CBTs, computer-based training. So there's a PowerPoint essentially on every single system in the C-17. Every facet of the C-17 has a CBT. And I wish that I knew the number off the top of my head, but it's weeks and weeks of CBTs before you even And within, like, sprinkled in there are simulators that you get to do. So that at first I was like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to learn all of these things. But frankly, it's a very easy aircraft to learn once you understand, like, maybe the lens that they were building it through. And the systems are wonderful. Like in the cockpit, all you have to do is follow the line, like, to
Right.
understand,
Yeah.
like, oh, this component feeds into this component. Like, it's very logical, which is great.
Like a flow chart almost that goes this way, this
Yeah,
way. Yeah.
100%. Yep, yep.
So yeah, you must have got thrown straight into the academics. Was it straight into the deep end, or did you kind of like gradually go up into your training?
Oh, it's straight into the deep end. You show up and they're like, here's your iPad, uh, here's your schedule, here's the CBT lab, go get busy. And I'm like, okay. And off you go. The Air Force truly believes, in my opinion, in, like, fight or flight and in the fire hose effect. So either you're going to stand your ground and handle it, or this is not made for you. And either you're going to, like, hold on to the hose while it throws you around and learn everything quick, or you're not going to make it. And so, thankfully I made it, but it was a lot at first. It was a lot to learn in my small aviation brain that was, like, just getting started.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that must be a conscious decision from the U.S. Air Force, like that fire hose to weed out who can't get
Yeah.
get the problems, and so we can focus on the people who can. So it's probably a good. I don't think I could do that because I'm terrified of stuff like that, thrown straight into the deep end. But you've actually made it, which is great. But yeah, can we talk a bit about your first flight and what that was like?
Yes, I remember. So when you go through C-17 initial qual, you're paired up with a partner, and so you two, because obviously crew aircraft,
Yeah.
you two go through the whole course together. So you do every sim together, you do every flight together, you do every check ride together, like, you're attached to the hip. And I remember, I don't think I'll ever forget this, but riding the bus out to the plane, and I was like, I get to fly today, like. And I think I was in the seat first, so I did the first takeoff. And it's funny, our simulators are great, but there's obviously things that you just cannot replicate,
Yeah.
and, like, seat of the pants feeling. And I remember the stick was vibrating because the nose wheel, I had never learned that I needed to put a little bit of pressure on the nose wheel in the sim, because it doesn't
Yeah.
do that in the sim. And we rotated, and I think we pulled close into the pattern because we just do a couple patterns. And I remember asking my instructor, I was like, does the nose always shake like that? And he was like, no, that was you. And I was like, oh, okay.
That's brilliant.
uh, so, but yeah, I think we just did a few patterns, and then we went out and I think we flew low level as well. That was my first experience flying that giant airplane 300 feet off the ground. But
Wow.
uh,
Amazing.
yeah, it was a lot of fun. And out there, they have some really good low levels for initial quals. I don't know if you know anything about Oklahoma, but it's flat. It's
Yeah.
very flat, which is a great place to train brand new pilots. There's no complications to your route planning. There may be a small hill, but that's it.
Yeah.
And so that's essentially what you do while you're there for initial qual. You work on pattern work, you do low levels, and you start working some very basic TAC arrivals and TAC departures. And that's it.
Yeah, so I was going to talk about your flying training. Yeah, so does it go in stages, like, just basic flying? And when do you, I'm guessing the end point is, the actual missions that the C-17 is built for, the airdrops. Like, how long does it take to get from that initial, getting used to the aircraft to doing the actual mission in that flying training phase?
So it's interesting because we kind of break our training up. So when you go through initial qual, you are training basic aircraft control things, and just getting you good enough to hand you off to the squadron
Mm-hmm.
to make a finished product out of you. So they're just making sure, like, you're capable of taking off, landing, doing a low level, like, running checklists essentially, which is what a co-pilot does, as you know. And being like, okay, this person is up to standards. Now it's up to the flying squadron to build them into the
Oh, right.
C-17 Air Force
Okay.
pilot
Right.
we need them to be. Yeah. So, and our plane is a little bit different where we go back and forth to the schoolhouse for every single upgrade that we do.
Wow.
And so you go through initial qual, which is like your co-pilot check ride, if you will. And then you'll come back when you go through PCO, which is pilot checkout. So that's when you're getting ready to upgrade to aircraft commander. Um,
Right.
but when you're at the schoolhouse, you're still just training those tactical, technical maneuvers. So tack arrivals, tack departures, all of that stuff at the schoolhouse. And then when you go home, you have to get evaluated on your ability to run a mission and run a crew and get
Wow.
in and out of any field in the world. So they're very different, but they're all part of the same upgrade process.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in. Yeah, as a pilot, that must be. Yeah, you must be in the books all the time.
Yes, yes. And all, I mean, you can't stop because there's so many pieces of information that you're responsible for as an aircraft commander. And, like kind of hate, kind of love these iPads because they can hold millions of pages of information. But that just means you're responsible for
Yeah.
millions of pages of information. So, which is obviously impossible. You just have to know where to find it.
Yeah.
That's your responsibility. So yeah, it's a lot, and we put a lot on our young pilots. I mean, my first A code, what year was that? I was 27 years old,
Wow.
flying a $225 million aircraft with a crew of five. Um, that's a lot of responsibility for someone that age.
And did you consciously think of that when you were flying this that mission? Or
No,
no?
and of course, like your first A code, we call it your A code on the order. So it's your first mission as the PIC. And, we tease people because usually that's when that's when stuff hits the
You can
fan.
swear,
Like
it's fine.
sometimes I have a potty mouth.
Me too.
Uh, uh, my first takeoff as an A code, I was max weight. I was 585,000 pounds.
Oh.
Which is stressful. Like you have no outs, you're very told limited. You have to have a very succinct plan if something were to go wrong. If you were to lose an engine at rotate, things get hairy very quickly. So I'm 585,000 pounds. I think I had a divert for weather. Like all of these things happened. I had a 30 knot cross, which is our max crosswind on the second leg of the day. Like
Wow.
I had to land with max crosswinds. So I took off max weight. I had to land max crosswinds. I was like, what else is this day going to throw at me? Thankfully, nothing. But yeah, but that's a lot of responsibility for a very young individual. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think about that more and more now as I get older and age out, and I'm teaching younger people. I'm like, man, I forgot I'm a totally different person now than I was when I was 27.
Absolutely, yeah. And how long did it take you personally to get used to working with a crew, another pilot? Was it instant, or did it take a while for yourself?
Upstairs we do a really good job of integrating, but it took a while for me to truly integrate with my load masters, and that's not because it's because I didn't understand what they were doing down there. Like I get it,
Right.
they're doing load master things, right? Like they're configuring cargo, weight and balance, all of that stuff. But understanding what it took for them to get to that point in their careers, that's when it really like meshed for me.
Hmm.
And when you go through pilot training, it's you. All you worry about is you. Like you're worried about yourself, you're worried about your training, you're worried about flying the airplane. That's it. And then they kind of just throw you into the C-17 and they're like, oh, by the way, you have a crew back there, handle it. I'm like, oh, okay. So it takes a while, but the load masters bring you in. And if you're a wise person, you'll find a good old crusty load master and ask them to take you under their wing and teach you the things that they care about so that you can start bringing that into your cross check.
Yeah, and I've wondered this for a while. Is there any maybe conflicts, not the word, but I'll say conflict between like the aircrew and the guys in the back, or is it like, are you quite integrated, or is it like kind of segregated? You do the mission, then it's like we won't talk again.
Yeah, so I've been on crews that have been pretty toxic. for one reason or another, where like upstairs, downstairs didn't
Yeah.
really see eye to eye. But more often than not, when we're on the road, like we are a family. Like we
Yeah.
do meals together, we talk about the mission, we like stay together. Um, and that's one of the best parts about flying these crew aircraft is like you work all day and then you play all night until it's crew rest time, and you really get to know somebody and really bond with them. And I really enjoy meeting people.
Mhm.
And so that's part of what I love about it.
So, Emily, can you talk us through some of the strengths and weaknesses of this C-17?
Sure. Strengths. We have incredible brakes. We can put that. I mean, our max takeoff and our max landing weight are the same, which is
Mhm.
very rare for an aircraft that size. So I could take off at 585, I can land at 585. Um, so that's definitely a strength. We have great brakes. We have big old barn doors out there that help, bring the weight down on the aircraft. Weaknesses, I think, our jets are pretty beat up from years and years over in the desert, and so I think the life cycle of every jet, you start when they come off the assembly line, they're brand new and shiny, and trends start to develop, right? So trends and like this is breaking on
Yeah.
several jets. We can start to anticipate that that's going to happen to the rest of the fleet, and so we've been having some maintenance issues, and it's just cyclical. Every jet goes through it, but I think it's just very telling of what it's been going through for the last 20 years. It's a very technologically enhanced airplane, and so
Mhm.
there's a lot of technology that goes into there. And so when I watch my maintainers like troubleshoot, it's very interesting actually,
Okay.
because there's they like enter their secret maintenance code, right? And then all of our screens turn into something different. And
Yeah.
like, when you're flying, you have no idea that technology is in there. And you're like,
Yeah.
I didn't know my WAP could do that. Like, and they're using it as like a menu. And
Yeah.
um, so it's actually really, I like watching them work because I like to see like you learn stuff every time you
Absolutely.
watch them work. Um, but employment weaknesses, I'm trying to think.
Is it maybe the runway that you can't get into everywhere? Maybe is that like a weakness? Would you say?
Maybe the width of the runways, because our max width, our minimum width is 90 feet. The minimum length we need to land is 3,500 feet, and so
Mm.
um, we can pretty much get in there. Uh, if we're carrying a bunch of stuff, like obviously told is limited, so maybe like 6 to 7,000 feet is the minimum. But I'm trying to think. I mean, it's such a capable aircraft.
I
Like
was going to say, if you can't even think of a weakness, it must be
I
great.
can't. It's, what, we're not super fast. That's a weakness. Crossing the oceans, like everybody passes us like over the top, and it's
Just
very
waving.
demoralizing. I'm like, oh, just get there. Yeah, I guess that's it. I mean, we cruised at 0.74 across the ocean, which is not fast. It's quite slow, actually. So a lot of times they're like, can you pick it up a little bit? And I have to make sure we have gas. I'm like, yeah, we can go 7.6, but um,
What does an
yeah,
airliner do? Is it about the same or is it a bit faster? 0.8 maybe?
I think it's point 0.8. Yeah.
Yeah. It's still not. It's still moving though. 0.76, 0.74. So yeah.
I had like a 630 knot ground speed the other day because we had
Oh
like a
really?
150 knot tailwind. It
Brilliant.
was fabulous. It was the fastest I've ever crossed an ocean.
That's great. But
Yeah.
as all viewers have seen, maybe on our Instagram and other, I posted that brilliant photo of you in the dark with all the cockpit lit up. I want to talk about the cockpit. What's it like to work in? Because it just looks amazing. It looks almost like Star Trek or something.
Yeah, it's really great. And to be honest, because I have no flight experience outside of the Air Force.
Yep.
I'm kind of spoiled and don't realize how good I have it because I'll walk into um I was in a KC-135 one time and I was like, what is this? How do you fly up here? I don't understand. So I'm just so spoiled.
Yeah.
I'm a HUD baby too. It's incredible. It's incredible. Flying a big aircraft like that with a stick, for one thing, is very rare, and it's just I don't know, it's a better experience, I would say. Like in the T1, I didn't love the yoke. I was like, this is so awkward. Why do they design planes like this? And then I got to the C-17. I was like, see, this is what I'm talking about. This is great. Like one hand for the stick, one hand for the throttles. Logical. It's easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very spacious cockpit. So we have obviously pilot, co-pilot. We have a Rackham Lackham. So right additional crew member, left additional crew member. So we have 4 seats up front. And then in the crew rest area, we have 2 additional seats, and then 2 bunks. And so there's lots of room upstairs, which is nice. Lots of headroom too. And then the screen, like the technology in the aircraft is great. And the HUD, we're getting a new HUD actually, and I'm interested to see how different it is, but because our HUD is very rudimentary in terms of HUDs, I guess, but it's such a great tool. I love it. It's one day when I transition out of the C-17, it's going to be very difficult for me to remember how to land without a HUD.
Yeah, I think even airlines are getting HUDs now. I think, is it the Dreamliner has a HUD? So maybe the
yeah.
Well?
I'm like, see, I can do that. I can fly a Dreamliner. No big deal.
Easy. But yeah, someone wanted me to ask you this before I move on is what kind of meals do you get in flight on these long missions?
Oh, that's sweet that they think we get meals. We just bring our own stuff. So if I'm going on a week-long mission, I meal prep a few meals ahead of time. Yeah, I usually stick with like chicken, rice, and some raw vegetable that I can eat, like peppers or carrots. But yeah, so that's one of the biggest time sucks when I'm prepping for a mission is thinking through food, because you have to get through at least a day, but then especially with COVID, you're like, okay, where are we landing? What time locally are we landing? Is anything open?
Mm-hmm.
Do they, especially with COVID, like a lot of places restrict you to your room. It's like, okay, will you deliver me food? No. What are my options? So that's like that takes the longest prep work when I'm getting ready to head out the door for a mission. So, but I try to eat healthy. I try to eat as healthy as I can. Because, flying 24-hour days is very hard on your body. The last thing you need to do is be filling it in my world, like filling it with crap. So
yeah, because I've heard pilots before where they sometimes eat healthy and sometimes they eat terrible for ages and then they feel horrible afterwards, like these takeaways.
Yeah, it's like I'm already like dog tired. Although I did meet someone, this guy I flew with, he's like, I only eat bad on the road. And I was like, interesting. He's like, yeah, I'm already abusing my body. Like add on to it, just get it over with. And when I come home, that's when I eat healthy. I'm like, okay, well, that's one way to do it. Sure. Yeah.
Absolutely.